Music Business Radio is brought to you by Avenue Bank, dedicated to serving Nashville's music industry. Find out more at thedifferenceisreal.com.
From Music City, USA, it's David Hooper and Music Business Radio.
From big studios in Nashville, Tennessee, it's Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper. And with me today, Jonathan Cain, after performing, writing, and recording with some of the best-known bands and vocalists of the 80s. Keyboardist and longtime member of Journey, Jonathan Cain can look back and reflect on a successful career. He's Grammy-nominated. He's won the BMI Award for Most Performed Song of the Year twice. And as a songwriter, he's written songs that have been recorded by Michael Bolton, Sammy Hagar, Kenny Rogers, the band Heart, Greg Allman, Conway Twitty, and the Oak Ridge Boys. Jonathan, welcome to Music Business Radio.
It's good to be here. Man,
you have had a long career.
It's been good.
It's been real good.
It's been a ride. I'll tell you what, it didn't start pretty. Actually, it started on the accordion.
Let's take it back then. So you grew up in Chicago.
I grew up in Chicago. I lived over in Italian delicatessen. And after I got all the Italian songs down, on Friday nights, the guy that owned the deli would close the store, and then he'd say, "Johnny, you coming down and play it for my friends? You know the songs I like," so I still had a strap to hold it on me, and I remember the old guys would sit down there in their folding chairs, and they had the cigars and the Perotti, cigars, the stinky ones, and the Chianti would come out of those big long bottles with the straw on them,
Yeah.
And they'd sit there getting all teary-eyed and singing along, as I went through O Solo Mio and Funiculi, Funicula, and all these Italian classics. I knew I wanted to be an entertainer right then.
Yeah, it sounds like you really touched on the emotion. I imagine that was a huge turning point for you.
Well, folk songs that you learn on the accordion stay with you forever. And the power that they give you is you can turn a room on. I saw what I was able to do with those songs. The Tarantella, for example, da 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 da, and everybody's dancing. And next thing you just spun the whole room around on its butt, and you're like, wow, this is the power of a song. And I was happy that my father chose the accordion for me in the beginning. Of course, I went to piano when I was 12, but just having the book of those folk songs, I think Sting talked about this, gives you such a broader picture of what popular music is to be. Not necessarily, if you worked on Beethoven and Mozart and Brahms and Schubert and all this stuff, that really wasn't what really was the heart and pulse of the people. You know what I mean? So growing up playing the folk songs, the real sort of rustic polkas and all that stuff, you watched how you could move people with that. And then, of course, you went on, and, I went on to study classical music in college, but it was a good way to start my musical career.
As a teen, you were doing, I guess, like top 40 music in
Top
clubs?
40 music, yeah. Did a lot of that stuff. Put bands together. I kind of went from rock to pop, and I had to go to school at some point. My father didn't have enough money to send me to college, so I used the nightclubs to sort of make money to put me through college. So I ended up going to Chicago Conservatory of Music. That was during the Vietnam days, so we had to stay out of trouble and make B average, or we were going off to Nam, So I pulled a good lottery number, unlike a lot of my classmates that were disappearing during those years. I mean, literally, weeks later, they were gone, shipped off to the jungle. But so I was able to stay out of the draft, but mostly it was a song that I fell in love with. And, when I saw Burt Bacharach and guys like Jimmy Webb and Lennon and McCartney, big fan of the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, and all the things that they were doing, I thought, this is what I really want to do. So I knew I wasn't a virtuoso. I played with virtuosos in school, and I helped them, but I had a good ear, and I just kind of moved on to the songwriting end of things.
So a lot of people know you for your work with Journey, which is, of course, a West Coast band. But what maybe a lot of people don't know is you spent some time in Nashville in between Chicago and going to the West Coast.
It was a kind of a strange deal. I was in Pekin, Illinois, at a little studio called Golden Voice, where actually Dan Fogelberg and Michael McDonald started out. And Jerry Milam, the owner, had sent my tape to Buddy Killen, thinking that Buddy might get a couple of songs that I'd recorded, and he did. And he called me and my father and asked us to fly to Nashville to sign this little deal. So we did like 4 sides of singles for him, and I signed a little publishing deal to Tree and recorded at the Sound Shop with the Muscle Shoals rhythm section. And changed my life forever. And I got to meet Chet Atkins and Bobby Goldsboro and Ray Stevens. And
that's like big time.
It was big
for people
time.
who don't know the Shoals Rhythm section, I mean, name some of the records that they played on.
Oh my gosh,
like, it's like Staple Singers.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest of the big from
No,
like
they were
60s and
funky
70s soul music.
rockers. The piano player had a patch over his eye. It was like, I forget, it's Bobby somebody. I forget his name. But truly, that spoiled me. I was like, it was like getting on a stagecoach for the first time.
You're listening to Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper. And with me today, Jonathan Cain. He's Grammy nominated. He's had the BMI Award for the Most Performed Song of the Year twice for his work with Journey, Who's Crying Now, and Open Arms. Now, after Nashville, you went out to Los Angeles, and you were doing the solo thing.
Right. I had put together the Jonathan Cain Band. We're recording. Wolfman Jack had a manager, Don Kelly, and they were friends, and they had seen me perform and said, really like your songs. Maybe you could come and we'll get you free studio time and let you continue on with your writing, and we'll see what happens. So I was with Wolfman, his agency and all that, and he was real sweet and supportive, and I'd play him songs, and I just love the guy. They made American Graffiti at that point, and I got to go to the cast dinner and sit next to Harrison Ford and do the whole yucking up with these amazing people who were going to be superstars down the road. So I would go to the Midnight Special tapings every Tuesday night.
And that was huge. And
Huge.
Some people may not know what that is, but that was kind of like American Bandstand.
Absolutely. It was even cooler because there was a live element to it.
Mm-hmm.
So every Tuesday, I had a free pass to go see whoever was coming in. That could be Wilson Pickett, you just name it. They were all there. I even saw T-Rex, a rare performance, Mott the Hoople, all these Billy Joel. And how they reacted to the TV audience was so interesting. How some of them were so cool and some weren't so cool. They were very matter of fact, and I've seen some even walk out. They weren't going to perform at all because they didn't feel the spirit, which was really strange. He'd come all the way to California to do a show, and then Bert Sugarman's pulling his hair out. What now, But, yeah, so it was really cool. And then I had a kind of a minor hit in L.A. called Till It's Time to Say Goodbye. It was a pop record. And then I got on American Bandstand. I did it with Natalie Cole in 1977, I think. Right before the Babies.
What was that like? I mean, that's kind of like, is that when you knew that you were going somewhere?
Yeah. Well, Wolfman really liked this song, and I think he had something to do with it being a hit in L.A. because, he'd been high on it. And so just to get on the Dick Clark show was just huge. And he couldn't have been sweeter. I actually got to do 2 songs, and we did an interview, and he asked me to kick classical music in the ass. He goes, you study classical. I kind of want to diss it a little bit. I don't know. I said, so I went along with it. I'm sure we can. So he asked, so John, what's classical music like? And I said, well, it's kind of like going to a museum and looking at something that was nice one time, and he goes, that was perfect. So really cool experience for sure. But it really didn't amount to much. And we kept at the clubs and went more of a rock and roll kind of thing. And so I tried to get more of a rock edge to the music. That's what they were asking for. And Albert Grossman from Bearsville Records, who was managing Dylan and, Joplin and the band and all that, he'd come to L.A. and he saw my band and he wanted to sign us. So we got our first album deal on Bearsville. So he shipped us off to New York, upstate New York, and we made an album there.
Was it what you thought it would be? Wasn't that kind of like the holy grail of the music industry back then?
No, I was much happier in L.A. recording. I really was. We went up to the woods and everything went wrong and nothing worked. A lot of downtime. The air conditioner broke and tape machines broke, and we sat around for days with, I don't know what we were going to do. So we lost a lot of momentum, I think. And it's like taking city boys and, putting them in the woods. It wasn't rock and roll for us at all. We were going crazy. And it turns out the damn place is haunted. Something up there there's all kinds of spirits and Indians, and I don't know what was going on, but we were all freaking out. Everybody's drinking too much. It didn't go well at all. So, it was kind of an album that's sitting there, and they weren't going to put it out, and we had a big war over it. And then I finally forced their hand. I said, put the damn thing out. We worked on it. And so I said goodbye to all that. And Warner Brothers said goodbye to me. So I was left, without a label or really a gig unless I wanted to go back to Top 40, and I decided not to. So I sold stereos for about a year at Cal Stereo and wore one of those jean vests that said Cal Stereo on it, and did the day job thing and, played my piano at night.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I know it sounds so easy when you talk about it, like you've had the success, and somebody would look at your discography over the last 30 or 40 years and be really impressed, as they should be. But there's some down times in there. So when we come back, we're going to talk more with Jonathan Cain about his time with the Babies, then Journey, but of course some of that downtime, because it didn't really happen all at once, like we're kind of time-lapsing here on the radio show. So more from Jonathan Cain when we come back on Music Business Radio.
I'm Bart Herbison, Executive Director of the Nashville Songwriters Association International, and you're listening to Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the biz.
On the web at musicbusinessradio.com.
Why can't a bank get back to me as fast as I get back to them? I mean, someone asks me a question, I give them an answer right there. But when you go to some banks for help and they tell you that you have to wait while they go out of town to get answers, that's just plain annoying. On the other hand, at Avenue Bank, all the financial decisions are made right here in Nashville. So when you go to Avenue with a request, you get a response, not a big delay. I like that. You will too. Avenue Bank, member FDIC.
254624.
Hi, this is Lee Lockman from Chicago, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
From big studios in Nashville, Tennessee, it's Music Business Radio. I'm David Hooper, your host. With me today, Jonathan Cain. You know him from the Babies, Bad English, and of course, Journey. He's a songwriter. He's written songs recorded by Kenny Rogers, the band Heart, Conway Twitty, the Oak Ridge Boys, Colin Ray, Lorrie Morgan, Mariah Carey, and Peter Frampton, just to name a few. And Jonathan, the last section we were talking about kind of like the downtime. And you told me before the show, and I thought this was interesting, you really didn't hit success until you were 30, and which is really interesting to talk about these days in the music industry, because, you know, if you're over 18, so you're too old. You're too old.
I know. It was funny. After my deal with Bearsville, you know, and everything had gone south, you know, when I got the job at the stereo shop, I realized that I was pretty bitter, you know. I needed to take a step back. And I always think that, you know, when you get negative on a passion that you have, it's time to step away from it, you know, and regroup. And so I just needed that time to just sort of collect my thoughts and get over what had happened. I split up with my brother who was in the band. I told him I didn't want to do anything with him anymore. You know, at that point, we went separate ways. I mean, we were still friends, but I said musically, man, I just got to cleanse. Just got to do it. So I just became, you know, a fan of albums, and I bought the Steely Dan album. I had these really great JBL speakers. I remember this little apartment and my piano, and I just sat back and listened to great records.
Well, that's the advantage of the Cal Stereo job, is you get great speakers.
That's right. You get the great speakers. Anyway, so through the Bearsville connection, I had a friend call me about a publishing situation. And that was still one of the things that I was passionate about, was writing. And I continued to try to write during this downtime, even though I was depressed about what had happened. I thought, you know, and I still have something to say. So a lot of this stuff was kind of down and bluesy and, you know, sort of what you'd expect. And I was just continuing, you know, to try to put something on paper and make little demos on my little TAG 4-track, you know. And then I got this opportunity to write with a friend, Robbie Patton, who was working with Fleetwood Mac at the time. And he and I wrote a couple of songs. We wrote a song for a gal named Sylvia Vartan, who was a huge French singer, pop singer, a song called Distant Shores, and we had a huge hit with it. He was on Rocket Music, which is MCA. There's a co-write, my first real co-write, you know. A light went on, and I thought, I'm good at this. You know, I can suss this out. And he was English, and I kind of got his humor, and we got along great. And he couldn't really play the keyboards that well, and he liked the way I played. And then he told me about an audition that was taking place at SIR, and that was for the Babies. So at first, I was kind of reluctant to go there, thinking, well, they're kind of gypsies. I don't know.
So you knew about them?
I knew about the Babies, yeah, because they had that huge hit, Isn't It Time? And oddly enough, it was funny because their album was a Coke mirror in L.A., and I'd seen it on a lot of people's coffee tables there. I thought, oh, great, you know, what's this going to be like? So I actually, you know, he convinced me to go to the audition, and so I went, and we played, and it was kind of strange. They were kind of distant with each other, and they were in debt. But we jammed, and, you know, John knew all the Motown R&B things, the Mustang Sallies, and little did we know that we had so much in common musically, you know, that we had loved the sort of rhythm and blues side of things.
Was that really what made you click with him? Just talking about the music that you enjoyed?
Yeah, and I had written a song, you know, during my down period. One of the better songs was called Stick to Your Guns, which my father had said to me. one night on the phone, and I thought, stick to your guns. And I played it for him before I left, and that was my calling card, it turned out to be. Let's get the guy that stick to your guns guy. That's what they kept saying. And kind of got the job because I showed up probably 3 times to jam with them, and I knew their stuff, and I could play all the parts, and, I had really good pitch, and I could sing backgrounds, and I played guitar. They liked that. I hadn't played electric guitar yet, but they knew I played rhythm guitar, acoustic guitar. So when I finally got to go with the Babies, I got my passport and immediately was whisked off to Amsterdam for television shows, with Head First. So we were doing, I think Every Time I Think of You was the big hit, and 2 months later I was on the road with Alice Cooper. I got off the plane in North Dakota in the frozen tundra to start the Babies Alice Cooper tour, and we played in front of 10,000 people, and I thought, wow, cool.
Finally,
I get a little respect, and the other part of the Babies that's so interesting is Ricky Phillips, our bass player, wasn't always our bass player. John was playing bass. And I could tell John wasn't having a good time singing and playing bass. He just didn't enjoy it. He was too much, And I said, John, forgive me, but it looks like you're being overtaxed here. Do you just don't want to play bass anymore? Because I can find a bass player. He goes, yeah, I'd really love that. So I said, well, we're going to take a lunch break. I'll go talk to some people. So I went across the street to Nadine's music store, and the guy behind the counter, I said, any good bass players? And it was Ricky. He goes, as a matter of fact, I'm a bass player. I said, you want to come over and play with these guys, the Babies that are next door? He goes, sure. I'll be over in 20 minutes. So he brings his great Telecaster bass, plugs in, and we rock. And it's like, now John looks at me and goes, so what else can you do, And so Ricky, that's how Ricky got the job, just he happened to be at Nadine's when I asked about bass players, and so it was really cool.
So now, what was that like joining an already established band? When you saw a need, did you just kind of fill it? Yeah,
well, I knew that John was tired of getting spoon-fed songs from the record company, because Isn't It Time came at him from Kelly Conrad. Great song, but not really who they were, I mean, when you were in a rehearsal with the Babies, that was a street band. They were more like Jay Giles, It was just a little rougher and tougher, and they weren't all about the pop fluff, John really just wanted a partner he wanted to sort of develop the Baby sound. So Union Jacks really was all-inclusive, except for Back on My Feet Again. We wrote the entire album together, and I just loved his voice, and I loved the spontaneity that he had at rehearsal, and I couldn't figure out why they needed all these other songs. And I just kind of went to him and said, let's just you and I write these songs. We don't need these guys.
Well, you had a great story about Back on My Feet Again.
Yeah.
And that was before the show, but tell it on the air here, because this is amazing.
It was funny. When we were in recording Union Jacks, they brought a song in. It was a Bo Hill song. It was called Yesterday's Heroes. And, we put the track together, and then John went to sing it. And, it was like, I'm yesterday's heroes. And I go, John, we are not yesterday's heroes. We're the effing Babies. That's how it goes, baby. I ain't letting you sing that. I don't know about you, Keith. And Keith Olsen was in there, and I said, Keith, does this sound like us? He goes, no. I said, well, John, maybe you can rewrite the lyrics. And so what happened was John took that track home, came back the next day with Back on My Feet Again. And that's when I knew, that I was working with a little genius. This guy knew his stuff, and he knew what he needed to sound great and to pull it off. And I think that was a huge, I've never seen many people do something like that cool, but we had a hit record with it. So it was really fun to go and jump in and do backgrounds on it, and happy times for the Babies.
Music Business Radio is on the air. I'm host David Hooper, coming to you today from Big Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. And with me today, Jonathan Cain. After almost 40 years in the business, he can look back and reflect on a very successful career. He's been Grammy nominated. He has the BMI Award for Most Performed Song of the Year twice for his work with Journey. He's written songs for Sammy Hagar, Mariah Carey, Peter Frampton. We're talking about his time with the Babies, which sounds like it was a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
And eventually transitioned to Journey. Talk about that transition and the decision to leave the Babies and go over to Journey.
Well, the Babies was always a turntable band. We got a lot of spins, but we didn't seem to ever equate it into sales. And Chrysalis had a huge debt on the Babies tab. The Babies did a lot of weird stuff before I was in the band with management. And they had re-signed. I think they were close to $1 million in debt when I joined them. So I got a check for $250 a week and all the publishing I could keep, and which Chrysalis tried to go after. Chrysalis, after the first album, they wanted my publishing, and I got a lawyer, and I said, I'll pay you on contingency, but they're not getting my songs. They're not paying me enough. So he scared the crap out of them. He said, they're not even going to be on the record. I was on over half the album. So they backed off of my songs. That probably the best thing I could have done was to spend that money and sort of set precedent. And after that, we did another album. And we went on the road. We supported just about everybody, from AC/DC to Styx, Ted Nugent. We played all the Midwest. We were very popular in Detroit. In the Detroit area, we played the Royal Oak all the time. Still nothing really slamming happened. We were still kind of just barely making ends meet. So we went back to do On the Edge, which is my second album. More of a rock record, probably more of, AC/DC style stuff. And that's when John Lennon got shot, when our single Turn and Walk Away came out, which there was a moratorium on playing new songs, and we needed the airplay to survive back in those days, and now you see him, now you don't, I remember Billy Bass, the guy that used to had A&R over there, said he had the Babies album. He said, "Babies, now you see him, now you don't." I go, yeah, exactly. We were never popular over there at Chrysalis for some reason. I don't know. Blondie was the thing, and there wasn't even any pictures of us on the hallways, So I thought to myself, well, before I was here, there must have been some weird stuff going on. But anyway, keeping my publishing was cool, and, going and doing these great gigs. We played these amazing shows with, AC/DC and, Styx, and for thousands and thousands of people. We played at the LA Coliseum for 90,000. Just unbelievable. Just electrifying to be up there in that little band rocking it out. Truly, I have a picture of it. It just doesn't even look real, to stand there and play in front of that many folks. So I was blessed in the gig department, and our songs were starting to get some credibility, but we just weren't making enough record sales to sustain ourselves. So what happened was we played with Journey. We opened up. They liked our album, and we played with them in '79. Opened up. And they saw me and said, "Hey, this guy, he could foot the bill." I think Greg Raleigh was going to retire at the time, get off the road, start a family. So he was on his way out, and they decided I was it, unbeknownst to me. So I remember we played a gig at the Kaiser Auditorium in Oakland as the Babies. It was one of our last tours, and then all the Journey showed up, backstage. And that's when I think everybody knew something was up. And John had announced already that, he was kind of tired of the debt and didn't think we were really getting anywhere. So he was thinking of going solo anyway. So they heard that and said, well, we might as well go for John. We'll steal John then. And so
there's no audition.
No audition. I called John and said, Journey called me and wants me to join their band, and I'm loyal to you first.
And that's got to be pretty scary, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
You're playing in front of 90,000 people. You've got a lot of people know your name.
Yeah.
And you walking away from it.
We had a lot of hopes for that band. We all of us did, and I could tell that it just the feeling at the record company was like, well, they just weren't into it. They weren't going to put up with it. And there have been difficult times, I guess. I don't know the whole thing of it. But, so John said, you know what? He hurt his knee. He had hurt his knee on the last leg of our tour and tore his ACL and was trying to get over that. And he said, I got to get knee surgery. I'm going to be out of it for months and months. So why don't you take the gig? So I got his blessing. And the other guys weren't so thrilled about it. Those were hard phone calls to make, to Ricky and Tony and Wally. And I said, I got to move on, And that summer, we had barely eked by. We didn't have enough money to pay the bills, and Dr. Pepper asked us to do a commercial. And so we went in, and they gave us like $30,000 or something to cut this spot, and that's what kept us alive that summer. So I had just gotten through the real lean summer, so to get that call was like terrific. So I went up, and started working on the new album. They had a beautiful rehearsal place up in Oakland. And I remember their manager picked me up in his Porsche and drove me straight to rehearsal, and had all my gear up there and all set up and was all very official. And he said, this is going to be this is going to be the Escape album. And, they rented a car for me. They got an apartment for me. They paid my rent. I had no worries. And it's kind of like the scene out of, Amadeus when he gets settled with his wife and he looks at his dad and he said, it's all good. I can write now. I don't have to worry about where my next meal's going to come from, And that was it. I mean, they made me so comfortable in San Francisco and took care of all my worries that all I had to focus on was the music, which was incredible. I had never been there. I'd always worried about where I was going to get the rent or where I was going to pay for this next credit card. And so that was a new feeling for me. And then we made Escape, which was an unbelievable experience. One of the best rehearsed bands that I've ever been in. I mean, Steve Perry was a brilliant director, the way he worked us. He worked us in every little detail. Every detail was what exactly was going to go on with a hi-hat to what was going to go on with the bass. And
so he was kind of the visionary for the band, would you say?
Well, he knew where the parts belonged, and he was very good at encouraging. He didn't know where they were all going to be, but he knew once the thing had a structure, how to get it there. And was pretty diligent in rehearsing the band and getting it to swing and getting it to feel right. And what I helped out was lyrics.
Okay, I want to dive a little bit deeper. We got to take a quick break. David Hooper, Music Business Radio from the big studios in Nashville, Tennessee. With me today, Jonathan Cain. You know him from his time with Bad English, The Babies, and of course Journey. We're going to talk more about Journey when we come back on Music Business Radio.
This is David Groh with HowlingMusic.com.
This is Holly Baranski from Four Corners Artist Management.
Hey, this is Pat Higdon from Universal Music Publishing.
Hi, I'm Dale Turner with Lyric Street Records, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
On the web at musicbusinessradio.com.
Why can't visiting a bank be more like visiting your favorite neighborhood restaurant, where you walk in and are immediately welcomed and appreciated, where a banker actually greets you, shakes your hand, and calls you by your name, not by your credit score or your account number, but by your name? At Avenue Bank, we call that concierge service, and it may not be what you'd expect from a bank, but it's what you'd like a bank to be. Visit thedifferencesreal.com. Avenue Bank, member FDIC.
This is Chris Bodley with Nashville's very own Flat Rock Revival, and we learned everything about the music business from Music Business Radio.
From big studios in Nashville, Tennessee, this is Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper, and with me today, Jonathan Cain. You know him from Bad English, The Babies, and Journey. What you may not know about him is he's also a very accomplished songwriter, writing songs for Michael Bolton, Sammy Hagar, Kenny Rogers, the band Heart, Greg Allman, Conway Twitty, and others. You joined Journey. They were already about 8 years into their career,
right.
But certainly the early 80s when you got in there was what most people think about when they think about Journey. You came in on the Escape album.
Mm-hmm.
9 million copies sold. Let's talk about it. You co-wrote Who's Crying Now, Don't Stop Believin', and Open Arms. All massive successes. When you sat down to write with these guys, did you have any idea that it was going to be this big? I mean, you knew the band was successful, but...
I had an advantage because being in the Babies, I got to watch them. I stuck around for their show pretty much every night because I wanted to see what happened. I don't know why, but I would. I'd stay there and watch. I love Neil's playing. Couldn't believe Steve's voice. And I watched what they did, and I watched what worked and what didn't work. And really studied it. Watched the crowd. Watched when they went ooh and they kind of lost them. And I thought, man, this crowd loves this band. They absolutely adore these guys every night. It was so focused, They just love Journey. And how fortunate were they to have that kind of audience, right? And so when they asked me to be in the band, my first job was to say, let's write some songs for these people. Let's include them in this mix here. I think that's where we're missing out. We need to write about them, the ones that love us, the ones that are paying the money to come see you. How can we plug into them? Because they're the reason we're here anyway. And I used to go see Springsteen. I thought he was singing to me.
Right.
He sang about my life, not just his life. It was about all of our lives.
Right.
I wanted to take the Springsteen street element and plug that in because I adored Bruce. I adored what he had done with his music. He kind of set me free in so many ways because he said it was okay to write a song about a fast car. You know what I mean? There were permissions that were changed when guys like Springsteen came out, And he had transcended the folk thing into the rock thing. You had the Christophersons, the John Prines, the Gordon Lightfoots. Does that go into a big arena? And that was a cool thing about Journey is that it had this sort of boy next door thing to it. that I loved. I loved the innocence of it. And Steve Perry's Hopelessly in Love with You, I mean, that was the first song that hit me. You know, it's like he was the boy next door. He was the squeaky clean kid, the Leave It to Beaver kid. He wasn't about chasing girls. That's what appealed to me, was how wholesome it was and American it was. So why can't we keep it that way? Why shouldn't we keep it that way? And his character, Steve Perry's character, along with the lovely blues and rock element that Neil brought in and everybody else fused together, could be something wholesome and meaningful. So it was my goal to try to take everybody's feelings into consideration. Neil had his classical stuff he wanted to get in his rock stuff. Perry had his melodies, his soaring, his storytelling. He wanted to tell stories. He wanted to be a messenger, you know. And it was so easy when I took these elements and said, let's just go do this.
Well, it sounds like you wanted to approach the audience in a certain way, in a way they related to, but you were also approaching Journey themselves. Mm-hmm. So I guess selling them on these ideas was maybe easier than it might have been.
Well, I think they were ready for something new. I had seen a couple interviews. I just had a 60th birthday, and there was Neil and Perry talking about they had kind of done what they did, and it was time to change. So they were really open for anybody to have any new ideas. And after I watched them, you know, night after night, I said, I'd like to hear you sing something like this. Let's just try to put some more colors into these songs and just more images and more scenes. And let's try to blow this up a little more into something this lovely audience can relate to a little more. Not so much about la-do-da-do-day, but let's give them something to think about as well. We were able to craft songs like Mother, Father, and, you know, Escape. And Escape was a title that was given to me by the manager, Herbie, and I said, what is Escape? You know, and Neil had this piece of music, and it was just obviously Escape. It sounded like Escape. I grew up with trying to get away from the draft, you know. I had just escaped the draft, and they won't take me, they won't break me, you know. And I felt like coming to L.A. was my escape. I was going to chase down a dream there, and I survived the thing. My 10 years sentence to be in L.A. wasn't so bad, but I always felt like I didn't belong there. And I did get to go to San Francisco briefly to do a solo tour, and I played at the old Waldorf, and I said to everybody there that I wish that I could come and work there. And darn if that didn't happen. I had one of the best shows of my short-lived solo career as the Jonathan Cain Band at the old Waldorf, and they were so interested in my career, and it couldn't have been sweeter, all the press. And I rode around the bus, and I love this town, and I ended up writing in San Francisco in a town that I always wanted to be with one of the premier rock bands. Unbelievable, you know. And the LA Times had contacted me, and this guy, Dennis Hunt, he got me to do this interview one night and put a rags to riches spin on it. And it just pissed me off because it was not what I had hoped for, you know, the way they painted it. It was all about the money, and that wasn't it. For me, I feel I brought the music to Journey as well. I didn't know what to think of that, but you learn. You do these interviews and you learn. Anyway, so, you know, I go back to Journey and we have the playback party and Escape, and I had changed a lot of stuff. I had a grand piano on a lot of this stuff, and to tour, I wasn't going to use one of those little electric pianos. I wanted a real piano, and they thought I was kidding. I'm not kidding. We're getting a real piano. We're going to mic it up, and that's going to be it. So we played our Calaveras County first show for the radio stations, and nobody booed. Nobody threw anything. They went pretty wild, actually, for all the stuff. And I was still nervous. I was hoping I wasn't going to see Where's Greg signs. We want Greg back, or because when you take over a Legends job, that's one thing you always think about in the back of your mind. But I never saw one. So it was great. And having that first year out there and performing at the Rose Bowl in front of nearly 100,000. One of the only rock bands to ever be able to pull that off. And that was Bill Graham, who came to us one year and said, I need a show from you guys bad. I need a big show. How about Anaheim? And I said, I don't like Anaheim. I got pushed around at the Aerosmith show there. I said, no, Bill. What? What do you want to play? I said, get us the Rose Bowl. And then Perry said, yeah, the Rose Bowl. You know, Bill, the Rose Bowl. You can do it. Nobody plays the Rose Bowl except Stevie Wonder. Well, Bill got it.
And Journey.
And Journey played it, and they came, and it was awesome.
You're listening to Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper. With me today, Jonathan Cain. You know him from Bad English, The Babies, and, of course, Journey. So Escape was huge. I mean, that was 9 million copies of that. What is it like to follow that up? At the end of the tour, they've accepted you. You filled those big shoes. Is there a lot of even more pressure on you than even joining like an established band?
There was so much swagger of confidence and arrogance that they were impervious to it. I mean, the whole band just thought that they were smoking hot and Journey was going to rock on no matter what. And I went with that. I hung out with a John Waite, who had that same swagger, and I thought, it's time to be like this. It's not time to think about what if we don't. It's time to just be what we are. So while we were on the road, on the Escape tour, I wrote Faithfully backstage, and Steve and I wrote Separate Ways. And we performed Separate Ways. This is how we rolled. I mean, we just whipped it out one night on a crowd, and we played it like the last 12 shows.
So you tested it in front of the crowd? And they
went nuts.
Right.
Absolutely nuts.
Knew you had something.
So we went in to our new recording project with 2 great songs. And it was easy after that to just sort of piece them together. I was hanging around with some of the 49ers, and Joe Montana especially was so cool, and I got to have lunch with him, and I said to Joe, we have similar deals, We travel, we have pressure, we have to perform. You got to throw touchdowns, I got to write hits, Did you ever think about what's going to happen next season? He goes, hell no.
Yeah.
He said, I got my boys, I got my team. I just go do it. I do what I do. I don't even think about it. I'm like, I'm going to be like him. I'm going to take Joe's lead here. And that's what I always did. I never worried, what if we couldn't?
When I come back, more from Jonathan Cain of Journey on Music Business Radio.
Hi, this is Clay Myers with Still Workin' Music, and you're listening to Music Business Radio, the best show ever.
You're listening to Music Business Radio on the web at musicbusinessradio.com.
Why can't you have a banker instead of just a bank? I mean, if your banking relationship consists of pushing phone buttons when a computerized voice tells you to, is that really how you want to bank? On the other hand, if you knew your banker by name, and more importantly, your banker knew you by name, then you've got something. That's how it is at Avenue Bank, because that's how we think banking and life should be. Avenue Bank. The difference is real. Member FDIC.
Hi, I'm Favored Nation's recording artist Johnny Highland, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
From big studios in Nashville, Tennessee, this is Music Business Radio. I'm David Hooper, your host, and with me today, Jonathan Cain. You know him from Bad English, The Babies, and, of course, Journey. I want to talk about criticism because you have to be immune from criticism to do what you do. Can we talk specifically about Rolling Stone? They were never fans of Journey.
They had a cover before I joined the band. They were on the cover, and it was all about Herbie, their manager, and what a genius he was, and very little bit about the band. It was like focused in on how successful they were, and we made Escape, and they panned the album and said, who are the streetlight people anyway? Frontiers, they didn't like it. They said that Faithfully sounded like it should have been on a Bob Seger record or something. I don't know. So we couldn't make them happy. But in the end, I always say those that can't do review. And Neil used to always say, Rolling Stone's in my bathroom for a reason. Use it if you need it. I'd be like, okay, Neil. It was always backhanded journalism. They like those drone bands, the REM kind of thing where it just drones.
Yeah.
The whole album was a drone. And we would just change gears all the time, I guess. We were kind of chameleons.
We talked about Dick Clark earlier, who, of course, owns the American Music Awards. And people always say, well, the American Music Awards, that's based on sales. The Grammys are the ones that really count. But there's something to be said about something based on sales.
It is.
Because people vote with their wallets, and obviously 6 million, you guys have sold 70 million records. Mm-hmm. Somebody likes it.
Yeah.
To kind of quote Elvis, 70 million fans can't be wrong, right?
Exactly. And that's truly our Grammy. Our Grammy is our fans. They're our Grammy. And if we never go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and we never win a Grammy, which I doubt we will, all those fans that bought the albums are good enough for us, really.
I want to talk about the latest record that you did with Walmart. which is pretty interesting because, the music industry is changing. A lot of stuff is going to downloads. Walmart, of course, is huge, the number one physical record store in the country. You guys did something with him. It was very, very successful.
It was Irving Azoff.
That's your new manager.
Your frontline. Well, he's been with us since 98. A lot of people don't know that, but he stuck with us all those years with Steve Augeri when he first became a lead singer, and Steve Perry left. So Irving did this thing with the Eagles and had an idea that it might work, and then we were next, and we played a corporate for them, and they loved our music, and there was a mutual admiration for the brand. I love the idea of having something that had bricks and a portal, if you will, and I was surprised because the downloads weren't nearly as strong as I thought they would be. It was really the CD sales that drove the 800,000 some units, but that was a home run, and really no former contract, no returns. We were the record company. We made the records for them, and they ordered, and that's how we did it. So it was a lot of work on our management's behalf, and they did a tremendous job pulling it off because they had the artwork together and the manufacturing part of it, and Walmart simply bought what they needed to sell, and it worked great. So we're very blessed to be in partners with them for sure.
Can you compare that to like working with a major label, the old school major label?
Well, you don't make nearly as much. There's just so much in between that. There's layers of all these legal contracts. They get a little piece of this and they get a piece of that, and there's returns that you have to keep track of and all the accounting, and in the end then you have to audit them. Mm-hmm. The audits can cost anywhere from 25 to 50 grand. We've had to do it over and over again. Sony is one of the better companies in the business, and still they make mistakes,
right.
Big mistakes that are worth hundreds of thousands, that if you don't, it's a shell game, you got to play the shell game. So, I didn't know just how crazy it was, but over the years with, 1 year we didn't get paid on cassettes. This was back in the 70s, 80s, but it's like, you kidding me? How much is that? Different price things that get put in, and there's just a lot of hidden lines that, unless you have a real legalese person, and then even then, Walmart's pretty clean. In one door, you get the money, and then they got the units, and they sell them, and that's it. So there isn't all this other stuff that's hidden in a contract somewhere that you have to negotiate.
So you guys are moving forward with how you do business. Another way you're moving forward is how you found your new lead singer, which is pretty interesting, off of YouTube. Mm-hmm. That's at least the rock and roll story. I'm going to get the straight version from you.
No, it's true. It's when Steve Augeri lost his voice, it was unfortunate. He came down with this really rare throat infection, kind of this yeast thing, that happened to him, and took him down. And he tried to come back, and then it happened again. Tried to come back. I think he had it 3 times. And it turned out it was diet and all this stuff that was going bad, and his body was just breaking down. Anyway, long story short, we moved on, finished our tour with some other singer that we had. Jeff Scott Soto just filled in for the time, and then he wanted to be our singer, and I just said, we've got to get back to what we sound like. These cover bands sound more like us than we do. And Neil said, you're right. I said, well, go look on YouTube. There's tons of them. They're unbelievable. They sing great. So we started looking. We found this guy and that guy and tried auditions, and we didn't want somebody so close. We found a couple of guys that were almost too close.
Some of these guys were sending me stuff, like I said, when they found out you were going to be on.
We didn't want to do the cattle call, though.
Oh, I sent it to the producer. He couldn't tell the difference. It was amazing.
Yeah. They figure out how to do it, and they have the timbre and the tone. And then Neil, he was like desperate to find somebody totally unique and different, and called me up in the middle of the night and said, I found a kid. He's great. All right, so I'll click on him, and then he's from Manila. I go, Neil, how do you plan to get this kid to the States, and does he even speak English, Long story short, he comes, and he is the real deal. He can sing, and he knows our stuff, and he can't speak English, and he's a heck of an entertainer. So we went ahead and did the album with him. And when I heard him in the studio, I thought, whew, this guy's got some lungs. I like it. So even better studio singer than he was live, truly great voice.
Well, you talked about, you came into Journey once they were established, big shoes to fill. He certainly did. Mm-hmm. Steve Perry is one of the top vocalists ever.
He's a huge fan of Steve Perry's. He adores him. And, sang those songs when in the club band he was in. And they weren't a Journey tribute band. They were kind of a rock and roll club band. So he did a couple of Journey songs along with many other bands. But it took him a long time to take ownership, to really go, you're the man. The legacy runs with you. So as you go, we go. And it took him a long time to say, hey, I am the man. Because he would look at me some nights and I'd say, Harry Potter, use the wand.
Yeah, and you had been there, so I
Be a
guess
wizard.
he was hanging out with you. And
I told him he was a wizard.
Yeah.
I said, act like a wizard.
Oh, well.
So, and then he did. We had this transformation. We took him over to Europe, and he just wowed us, and the confidence grew, and it was just a matter of, getting through the early awkward times.
You kind of started a trend. Boston copied you on that.
Absolutely. And you know what? I hope Jimmy Page does, too. I'm waiting for Jimmy. He's getting old, and Jimmy should get that band out one more time, and he should be able to do Whole Lotta Love one more time. He came to the Hammersmith, and we were teasing him. I said, come on, man. You see how easy it is? How much fun this is? What are you waiting for? So we'll see.
Talk about your songwriting process. You guys are still on the road. You had one of the top grossing tours a few years ago with Heart and Cheap Trick. I mean, you guys are still doing it, still platinum records. Is the songwriting process still the same? And is the pressure still the same?
The songwriting process is still the same. It's a little easier now. We have our roles sort of relegated. Neil comes in with his stuff, and he knows to leave me alone with stuff, and I don't mess with his stuff. And we have our little boundaries that we work with, and then we just leave each other alone, and we just pull it together. That's what we do. I don't really feel pressure in the sense that if I never write another song again, I have enough to play. So it's just trying to write something different and maybe chase in a little different direction and still be in Journey. And this album, frankly, is going to be a little edgier and tougher, and we're going to try to go for some different moves melodically and sonically and get a little heavier beat going on and try to dig in and do maybe a more rock thing for Europe, because Europe was very successful last summer. We did really well there. Played at the Donington, and we hung our own with some pretty heavy bands, like Korn, and, we're on the bill with these guys, and they were testing us, and we held up all right. That's one of the last places for us to succeed. And, really, radio here is it's the old hits. They're not going to play anything new anyway. So there is no pressure anymore. What you want to do now is just reinvent Journey, and make it leaner and give it a little different twist, Well,
it's kind of interesting you're going for Europe, too. It's heavier sound. You're still playing to that audience, it sounds like.
And it's still positive music. And I believe that Don't Stop Believin' really has been our calling card. So for me, it's like to bring a message of positive hope. That's our MO, So we're not going to write a bunch of dark songs. There are not going to be any dark Journey songs anymore.
You totally set me up for this. The Sopranos, though. Don't Stop Believin', and then you've got sort of a dark show. What about that? Was that weird when they gave you the call, like, hey, can we license this?
No, because I knew about it. I knew the writer of the show. He had told the producers that the last show always had Journey in it. And they all looked at him, with one eyebrow up going, Journey? Yeah, Don't Stop Believin'. And when you watch the scene play out, Tony really is looking for a feel-good song because his world had come crashing down. And everything was like, so the purpose of him hitting that in the diner was something to make him feel good and take his mind off of what was about to happen. And truly it redefines our song watching that scene go down. And when I wrote the song, really a lot of that came from the Sunset Boulevard nights, Friday nights of living in Hollywood in the 70s and watching the characters parade up and down and wondering what walks of life they all came from and why they were all coming to L.A. to chase something. Why were they all here and where do they all come from? And somehow they all sort of managed to congregate on Sunset every night and pack the streets. I used to go down there people watching, so Don't Stop Believin' really came out of that sort of people watching on Sunset Boulevard in 1972.
It still gets the reaction. I know. I've seen you guys.
Those were the Street Light people, by the way.
Yeah, that explains it. That explains it.
And how that people find their way to a place and fall in love and find a passion and find their calling or they don't, or they leave. So it's like the train thing. I always like the idea of getting on a train and going somewhere, and that's sort of the journey part of the song, you know, because I always thought of Journey as not standing still. That's why it's good to be in Journey, because Neil has that whole thing about his personality. He hates standing in one place. You know, he's kind of like a restless heart. You know, he's a rolling stone, and he kind of keeps me going forward and looking ahead. You know, and so he really has that journey element in his personality. So that's the Midnight Train going anywhere.
How do you keep a band moving forward after so many years? I mean, I know there's egos, there's a lot of time on the bus together. How do you keep them organized and moving in the same direction?
Well, you don't. You know, really, everybody gets tripped out and gets stuck. And the cool thing about being in a band is that we look out for each other. And you do it by setting an example, you know. You walk tall, you be positive, you bring new ideas, you're hopeful, you're confident. Your confidence eventually sinks into your bandmates, you know. And there have been times where, you know, I've been down and they'll pick me up and say, hey, you know, what's wrong? That's the beauty of being in a band, is that you're all brothers and they can all smell you. And if you're smelling funky, they're going to say, what's up? We have it happen in our band all the time. We have people falling off their bike and going to rehab, getting back up on the bike, going, you know, it hasn't been an easy ride for all of us. We're a family. We can be critical of each other. We can be brutal. You bring a song out and everybody hates it, and you're like, oh, man, why did I do that? Doesn't happen often, but it happens. You know, they'll run right over you and you don't know what happened. But that's part of the thing. You got to be able to be comfortable in a room together. Neil, I guess he's an only child. It's interesting. He feels like my brother, and I guess I am a surrogate brother in a way, you know. So we're brothers in this kind of goofy, crazy, wild ride that we've been through together, and we're tolerant, and we're brutal, and we're loving, and we're critical. All the things that brothers are, you know.
Like a real family.
Like a real family. Dysfunctional, too. And those things come and go, you know, and it's just somehow we all manage to, you know, we have a good management that keeps us on board and talks about the rational part of it. And I think we're fortunate and blessed to have that direction. Having Irving and John Barrick at Frontline has been truly incredible. And I think that really, if you're going to get in this business, you need somebody to keep your vision for you intact. So when you get a little skewed, you can always go back to them and say, what were we doing again? So get a vision keeper. That's
something that you brought up a few times is you haven't been afraid to ask for what you want, whether it's the publishing at Chrysalis or the songs that you want to do. Do you have any advice for artists that maybe are kind of being bullied by management or labels? Or
yeah, you got to ask yourself what you want. If you want to be pushed around, you don't have to take that. You know, I mean, in the end, you want to make your choices. If you feel like you have something to say and you feel like you have the right way to do it, then do it, you know. You're never going to really be your best until you feel free. You have to be free in your brain. So if you feel like you're tied to something, that's never going to allow you to reach your full potential. And when Journey took me out of LA and set me up and just said, go, I couldn't believe it. It took me a long time to just stop worrying, you know, about anything. And I've learned that, you know, and I get to write with Diane Warren one time, and Diane is just, she's brutal in a sense that she's brilliant. She knows what she wants. When she smells something, she goes for the throat. That's it. And she stopped doing co-writes because, you know, she just couldn't deal with all the politics. She knows she's good enough to do it, so she doesn't like to do the co-writes. Emotionally, she has trouble dealing with all of it. And that's part of it too, you know, so you have to deal with the people part of it. If you feel like you're better off on your own, then, man, don't be saddling yourself with somebody who's just baggage and you're dragging them along. And all you're thinking about is, man, I wish I was just by myself to just try something. Then do that, you know, then be free, how you can feel free and unencumbered, if you will. You know, that's the best way. If you're living in too big of a place and you think you're going to worry about it, then don't go there, you know. Get a smaller place, take it off your mind, and write better songs. The more you got weighing and pressing on you, the less you're going to be you. That's what I think.
Where can folks get more information on you if they want to just keep up with what you're doing?
Well, we have JonathanCain.com, and there's journeymusic.com. Those are the two places they kind of post stuff. I'm not really a Twitter guy right now. There's not much to Twitter about, but I will be as the record starts coming together and we start recording, and we'll have stuff to go on about.
Yeah, send us those updates. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. For more information on Music Business Radio, check us out online at musicbusinessradio.com. And I'll see you next week when I'll interview another industry guest.
Thanks for listening to Music Business Radio, a production of Tuned In Broadcasting Incorporated, Nashville, Tennessee. Recorded in the WRLT Lightning 100 studios. Music Business Radio is produced by Gary Crane, David Hooper, and Dan Buckley. Hosted by David Hooper. Engineered by Dan Buckley. Demo Derby coordination by Gary Crane and Jesse Smith. Special technical assistance by Tom Hansen. With Pro Tools post-production by Justin Hamill and Dan Buckley. And Lester reconfigured all the firewalls. For information on syndication, guest booking, Demo Derby music, or downloading previous episodes, visit musicbusinessradio.com.
Music Business Radio.
You've been listening to Music Business Radio, brought to you by Avenue Bank, dedicated to serving Nashville's music industry. Find out more at thedifferencesreal.com.